My name is Daniel. I'm not a hero, and I'm not exactly a victim either, just the older brother who once said, "Sure, I can help a little," and then woke up years later realizing my life, my weekends, and my paycheck somehow belonged to someone else. I used to save for a down payment on a small condo. My day started in a warehouse shifts that began before sunrise. The smell of oil and forklifts humming like tired machines in a choir. At night, I picked up extra work, delivery runs, odd courier jobs, even late-night drop-offs. My fingers were always cracked from cardboard and cold air. My back knew the sound of the loading ramp better than any mattress. But I had a simple dream, my own place, silence in the mornings, a key that belonged only to me. My younger sister Avery, charismatic, ambitious, with those glowing eyes that convince everyone the sky is just the starting line. When she got her acceptance letter from a prestigious university on the West Coast, our house erupted like it was New Year's Eve. Mom snapped pictures of the envelope next to a cake. Dad repeated the story of our girl to anyone careless enough to ask how things were going, and I got a pat on the back and the label, the reliable one in the family. At the time, I didn't realize that was a compliment with fine print. My parents didn't have the money for tuition. They didn't say it outright, but hints weigh more than words. Education is the best investment, Mom would remark at dinner, her eyes sliding in my direction as if my pockets were already full of scholarship checks. I answered the way an older brother should. Of course, I'll help, and I meant it. What was the harm in paying for a book or two? Covering a bus pass, maybe the occasional grocery run? That's how it began, small things, which have the dangerous habit of growing like shadows at sunset. First came the textbook for some required course, not much, just 100 here or there. Then came housing, which somehow turned out to be much more expensive than expected. Then bedding, kitchenware, a laptop, subscriptions to learning platforms, transportation passes. Then new sneakers, because everyone wears them here, and a dress for a social event because you have to look professional to fit in. Each transfer seemed minor at the time, until my bank app began to glow with notifications like warning lights on a dashboard. Each push notification whispered, another mile walked toward someone else's dream. Avery, meanwhile, was thriving. She dove into campus life like a fish into water, always surrounded by people, always with somewhere to be. Her social media turned into a catalog of polished snapshots, library glass walls glowing in the evening sun, dance parties on rooftops, sushi plates arranged like art pieces, cappuccinos with hearts in the foam. Captions read, "Work hard, play hard, dream big." All correct words, except the part about who exactly was working hard for whom. Friends of mine would comment, "Your sister is really living the dream, huh?" I'd respond with an emoji and flip my phone face down. Within months, small things had evolved into a lifestyle. My mornings began with a calculator. What's left after my rent, my parents' bills, her share of utilities, and gas for the week. My body learned the difference between cheap coffee and the absolute cheapest coffee. I stopped even browsing the home appliances aisle my eyes caught on kettles and toasters I couldn't allow myself to buy. The idea of a condo deposit, once a concrete goal, drifted into a folder in my head labeled, "Someday." I didn't want to be bitter. I didn't resent anyone outright. But I was exhausted, and the exhaustion clung to my voice in ways nobody seemed to hear. The few times I tried to raise the subject gently, Mom countered with her mantra, "Family takes care of family." Dad added, "Education is the foundation of everything." They looked at Avery with that mix of pride and fear parents have when they think their child just needs a push, and then she'll fly. And I couldn't bring myself to shatter their hope. Avery wasn't cruel. She simply didn't notice. Her schedule was a blur of lectures, projects, and social events. Her world spun so quickly it justified its own expenses. "I need to look the part, otherwise people won't take me seriously." She said it like stating a fact, not a demand. And I listened, quietly aware that I'd become an app, a send money button in her life's interface. The more often I pressed it, the less of me there seemed to be. One night, While hauling boxes at the warehouse, a coworker asked, "Man, why do you push yourself so hard?" I cracked a joke about being addicted to overtime. The truth was harder, because if I stop, someone else will fall. I wasn't just carrying crates. I was carrying every IOU I never agreed to sign. Avery's world kept inflating in price. She posted about online masterclasses, weekend retreats by the ocean to unwind, studio rentals for photography projects. She explained it all as portfolio building. I wanted to say that my portfolio consisted of receipts and unpaid sleep. But silence is easier than confrontation. When the family chat lit up with her voice message about studying abroad, cobblestone streets, scarves, tiny cafes with strong espresso, froze in the middle of an auto parts store, gripping a bottle of motor oil. She described new horizons with the lightness of someone picking a dessert from a menu. I muted the message and felt something inside me crack, not loudly but thinly, like glass under stress. That night, I sat with my parents, trying to explain, not accusing, just outlining limits. I said I needed a break, even just for a month. Mom patted my hand. "You've always found a way." There wasn't malice in her tone, only weary belief. Dad added, "Opportunities like this don't come twice." I wanted to ask, "And what about my opportunity? When does that come?" But their love for Avery filled the room like heavy perfume. Any complaint from me would have felt like betrayal. Afterward, I sat in my car outside the warehouse. Rain drew hundreds of quick lines on the windshield, each drop like a tally mark for another month of just a bit more help. I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed words I'd never dared before. I never agreed to finance everything. Helping is not a lifetime contract. I can say, stop. The words looked foreign, but breathing felt easier. The following days, I became hyper-aware. How Avery said, "You get it, right?" Like it was a password to my bank account. How Mom sent heart emojis after transfers, as if that made the sum invisible. How Dad joked about my iron stamina, not realizing it had long since rusted. I didn't judge, I just noticed. And the more I noticed, the clearer it became. My life had been rented out, without a lease, without a term, without my consent. The invitation to family dinner came in the group chat on a Thursday evening. "Nothing formal, we just haven't gathered in a while," Mom wrote. I decided to go, not to make threats, not to start a fight. I wanted to speak calmly, to say simple truths. I'm not a bank, I'm a brother. My plans aren't a storage unit for someone else's dreams. My money is my time, and my time is my life. On Sunday morning, I checked my balance, an old habit I couldn't shake. Then I turned off my phone and walked to my parents' house. The air was damp, leaves stuck to my shoes. A bus rumbled past, with an ad plastered along its side. "Education for the future." I almost laughed. I wanted a future too, just my own. Stepping inside, I heard voices, Avery's laughter, water running in the kitchen, the clatter of dishes. Mom hugged me. The smell of roast and cinnamon filled the air. The comfort of childhood wrapped in steam. The table was set with candles, and a golden box of pastries glowed in the center. I took a breath and whispered to myself, like before a long shift, "Speak calmly. Call things by their names. Don't apologize for existing." I didn't know that within minutes, simple sentences would ignite into sparks. That support would collide with burden, and family would clash with boundaries. Crossing the threshold into the kitchen, I still believed they'd listen. I really believed it. Family dinners were supposed to be easy. A roast, some wine, familiar jokes about childhood, maybe a game of cards afterward. But as I sat at the table, I already felt the imbalance in the air. My parents hovered around Avery like she was visiting royalty. They asked about her classes, her professors, her friends, her plans for the summer. They refilled her glass before it was empty. I sat quietly, waiting just once for someone to ask how I was doing. That question never came. Halfway through the meal, Evie launched into her study abroad fantasy again. She described cobblestone streets, international internships, museums that changed the way you see the world. She even mentioned how all her classmates were applying, as if that alone made it necessary. Then she turned her eyes toward me, with a smile that felt more like a command. I hope you're ready to pick up some extra shifts, big brother. These programs aren't cheap. I froze with my fork halfway to my mouth. The audacity stunned me. She hadn't asked if I could afford it, she had announced it as if my life existed purely to bankroll hers. I set the fork down carefully, fighting the tremor in my hand. Maybe, said evenly, you should consider getting a part-time job. She laughed. Me? A part-time job? Don't be ridiculous. I'm too busy with school. You know how demanding my program is. The words cracked something inside me. I felt my pulse hammer against my temples, my jaw tightening as if it wanted to break itself. I looked at her across the table, her hair perfectly styled, her nails manicured, her phone buzzing with notifications she didn't even check because she assumed nothing could possibly go wrong. You're joking, right? I asked, my voice dropping lower. You honestly think I'll just keep paying for everything while you sit back and live like a queen? The table went silent. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Avery's mouth opened in shock, but she recovered quickly, her eyes narrowing into knives. What's your problem? She snapped. You've always been so bitter. Just because your life isn't going anywhere doesn't mean you need to take it out on me. Her words hit harder than any slap. Bitter, a failure. After all the nights I'd worked until my hands shook. After every canceled weekend and every paycheck rerouted to her account, she saw me as nothing more than a loser. I leaned forward, my voice firm. Bitter? You think I'm bitter because my life isn't moving forward? My life isn't moving forward because I was too busy funding yours. Mom gasped, her tone sharp. That's inappropriate. She's your sister. It's your job to support her. I let out a bitter laugh. My job? Since when did it become my job to work 2 shifts a day so she could buy new clothes and sip lattes? Since when did my future get auctioned off so hers could be gift wrapped? Avery rolled her eyes, arms crossed. Oh, here we go. The martyr. Routine? That was it. The final straw. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the tile. Go ahead. Call me a failure, Avery, but at least I worked for everything I have. What have you done? Nothing. You sit around spending my money while pretending you're better than me. I turned to my parents. And you're no better. You've enabled her selfishness at every turn. You've treated me like the family wallet, not a son. Well, I'm done. I'm not paying for anything anymore. Not her rent. Not her tuition. Not a single cent. The silence was suffocating. Avery's face drained of color, her lips parting as if she couldn't believe what she'd just heard. For the first time in years, she looked genuinely shaken. You can't do this, she whispered, her voice trembling. How am I supposed to live? Figure it out, I said, reaching for my jacket. I've been doing it for years. Maybe it's time you learned. I walked out, my footsteps echoing in the hall. Behind me, I'd hear Mom calling my name, Dad muttering curses, Avery gasping in disbelief. But I didn't turn back. For the first time, I felt like I'd broken free from invisible chains. That night, I expected a storm and I was right. My phone lit up with messages. Avery started with sarcasm. Thanks for ruining dinner. Hope you're happy leaving your sister to starve. When I ignored her, the guilt trips rolled in. How can you abandon me like this? After all I've been through? Then came Mom's calls. Her voice dripped with disappointment. I don't know what's gotten into you. She's your sister. She needs your help. No, I told her flatly. She's been my financial responsibility for years. It's time for her to stand on her own. Dad called later. His voice was harsher, accusing. You're being selfish. You're punishing her for no reason. What's she supposed to do now? Get a job, I answered bluntly, like the rest of us. But the storm didn't stop there. A few days later, Avery's landlord called me directly. Apparently, she'd told him I was the one responsible for her rent, and when the payment didn't come through, he assumed I'd forgotten. She's not my problem anymore, I told him. You'll need to discuss it with her. I hung up, my hands shaking not from fear, but from something new. Liberation. Avery must have realized I was serious, because she showed up at my apartment one evening. She wasn't glowing or confident this time. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes wrinkled, her eyes red. She looked more like a child than the proud student she pretended to be. "You can't cut me off like this," she blurted as soon as I opened the door. "Yes, I can," I said, leaning against the door frame. Her face twisted in panic. "You don't understand. If you don't help me, I'll lose my apartment. I can't just move back home. Mom and Dad don't have space for me." "Not my problem," I replied, my tone ice cold. Her jaw dropped. "Not your problem? You're my brother. For years, I've been more than that," I shot back. "I've been your safety net, your credit card, your excuse not to grow up. I broke my back so you could live comfortably, and the one time I asked for respect, you called me a failure." "No, Avery, this is not my problem anymore." She blinked rapidly, stunned. "I didn't mean it like that. I was upset. I wasn't thinking." "You never think," I said sharply. "You never think of anyone but yourself. You used me. You used Mom and Dad. And now, you're panicking because you finally have to face reality." Tears welled up in her eyes. Big, dramatic sobs shook her shoulders. The kind of crying that once would have softened me. "But not anymore. You're cruel," she snapped between sobs. "Family is supposed to help each other." "No," I said firmly. "Family supports each other. They don't drain each other and call it love. Until you learn the difference, don't bother coming back." I closed the door, her words muffled by the wood. For the first time in years, I felt fully in control. But control comes at a price. I knew this wasn't the end, it was only the beginning of a different kind of war. Closing the door on Avery should have felt final, but in reality, it was only the first shot in a long battle. I braced myself for silence, maybe even relief, but silence was never her style. She thrived on noise, on attention, on spinning stories, where she was always the victim. The very next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Social media posts littered my feed. Vague quotes about betrayal, photos of her staring dramatically out a window, captions like, "Sometimes the people closest to you cut the deepest wounds." Friends commented with sympathy, "Stay strong, girl, you don't deserve this." I scrolled without replying. If she wanted to paint me as the villain, she'd have to do it without my participation. By noon, Mom called. Her voice was tight with disapproval. "How could you do this to your sister? She's struggling and you just walked away." "Struggling?" I snapped. "She's been living off me for years while acting like she's some kind of queen. Maybe it's time she learned what struggling actually looks like." Mom gasped at my tone, but I didn't back down. I was done playing the guilty child. Later, Dad called. His approach was angrier, almost a threat. "Ungrateful, that's what you are. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By tearing the family apart?" That part made me laugh. "Ungrateful? Are you serious? I've been paying her bills while you two sat back applauding her every move like she was the second coming. Meanwhile, I'm breaking my back every night. If anyone's ungrateful, it's her. And maybe you too." He hung up without another word. It didn't stop there. Soon extended family chimed in. An aunt I hadn't spoken to in years texted, "Family comes first. You should be ashamed." A cousin DM'd, "It's not fair to let her sink. You're supposed to be the responsible one." But interestingly, the more I explained the situation calmly, factually, the quicker people changed their minds. When I told my aunt that Avery expected me to keep paying her rent indefinitely, she was silent for a long moment before admitting, "That's unreasonable." And reasonable was putting it mildly. Meanwhile, Avery doubled down. When sympathy posts weren't enough, she launched a GoFundMe campaign, claiming she had been blindsided by unexpected expenses. She painted herself as a hardworking student abandoned by her family. Donations trickled in at first, a few $20 bills from classmates, but then slowed to nothing. People liked a sob story, but they didn't like paying for someone else's lifestyle. The mask began to slip. Word spread around her campus. Friends who once joined her for sushi nights and rooftop parties now ignored her calls. Without my wallet, she had nothing to offer them. Then came the breaking point. My parents called me in a panic. Avery, desperate, had gotten hold of a credit card in their name. She'd maxed it out within weeks on clothes, gadgets, and another networking retreat. The bill was thousands beyond what they could ever hope to pay. They begged me to help. I couldn't help but laugh. You enabled her. You defended her. You vilified me for refusing to play along. And now, you want me to rescue you from the consequences? No, this is your mess. You clean it up. For once, they didn't argue. Maybe they finally realized there would be no bailout this time. Days turned into weeks. I focused on myself for the first time in years. I picked up fewer shifts. I started saving again, even a little. I visited a realtor just to remind myself that my dream wasn't dead. The simple act of browsing listings felt like oxygen. Meanwhile, spiraled. Rumors reached me through mutual acquaintances. She had moved back in with my parents after being evicted. She complained constantly about the food, about the noise, about how they just don't understand me. She even joked, half serious, that maybe they should hire someone to take care of her now that I wasn't around. I felt a pang of pity, but it passed quickly. Pity was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. She kept telling people I had abandoned her. She left out the years I'd sacrificed, the nights I'd gone hungry, the endless double shifts. She edited the story until she looked like the tragic heroine, and I looked like the heartless brother. But lies have a short lifespan. Her GoFundMe scam leaked out, and soon even her closest friends backed away. Her world shrank. No dinners, no trips, no flashy photos. Just the four walls of my parents' house and the constant reminder that she'd lost everything she'd taken for granted. And my parents? They bore the weight now. Their savings dwindled under her demands. They cooked for her, cleaned for her, and still defended her when relatives asked questions. They had made their choice, and they were stuck with it. One evening, a coworker asked me, "Do you ever regret it, cutting her off?" I thought about it, about the years of exhaustion, the humiliation of being called a failure after all my sacrifices, the anger of watching my own dreams dissolve while hers soared on my paycheck. And then I thought about the silence of my apartment now, the few extra bills in my savings account, the weight off my shoulders. "No," I said simply. "I regret waiting so long." That night, I sat on my balcony, the city lights flickering. In the distance, for the first time, I wasn't carrying anyone else's life, just my own. As for Avery, the last I heard she was still stuck at home, blaming the world for her misfortunes, waiting for another savior who would never come. A small part of me still hopes she'd figure it out one day, that she'd learn responsibility, that she'd stop confusing exploitation with love. But mostly, I felt relieved. She had made her bed. Now, she could lie in it.